Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
It was boosted for Jim Acosta. That's what it was like last night for him in Tampa. For CNN White House correspondent Jim Acosta, in case you were curious what that looked like from his perspective, he shared his first-person view on his Twitter account. By the way, it took us a while to bleep and blur everything that needed to be beeped and blurred to make this PG for our viewers. But what happened in that video didn't give the president's son, Eric Trump, any pause at all. He tweeted the video from a different angle with the caption, #truth. And guess what? Guess who did that? The President of the United States. Classy guys. Sarah Huckabee Sanders was asked about this in today's briefing. Her first answer was a recounting of the responsibilities of the press. So they tried again.
Look,
does the White House support that or not?
While we certainly support freedom of the press, we also support freedom of speech, and we think that those things go hand in hand.
Joining us now, New York Times chief White. You know, we're not going to air that anymore. Let's make that the last Sarah Huckabee Sanders clip ever aired at 4 o'clock. Yeah, that's it. You know what? That makes me sweat. That is vile.
Well, and the previous answer.
That made me sweat.
The previous answer
this
that we
is someone who complains about a restaurant that exercises their First Amendment right to kick out someone that they think is obliterating democratic norms. I seriously, that made me sweat.
And the previous answer, the prepared answer, where she talked about the responsibilities of the press and talked about Osama bin Laden, was just a pack of lies.
Right.
So the prepared answer was a pack of lies, and then we got that.
You know, while I gather, Jim Rutenberg's here. We're going to get into this. Heilman set up lies. I'm gathering myself. Let's watch some lies.
Uh-oh.
Is honoring President Obama. He is the founder of ISIS.
We have more legislation passed, including the record was Harry Truman. That's a long time ago. And we broke that record.
I watched when the World Trade Center came tumbling down. Thousands and thousands of people were cheering as that building was coming down. Black home ownership just hit the highest level it's ever been in the history of our country. Congratulations. We've broken the all-time record in the history of the Republican Party. All-time record. My numbers are better right now than Ronald Reagan's numbers were with Jimmy Carter. Winning the Electoral College is very tough. Republican. Much tougher than the so-called popular vote, where people vote 4 times, you know. Much tougher. Much, much tougher.
What all those clips had in common was they were, of course, lies out of the commander-in-chief's mouth. Joining the conversation, New York Times chief White House correspondent Peter Baker, and at the table, as I mentioned, Jim Rutenberg, who covers media. Must be fun for the New York Times.
Boy.
But how do you, I mean, it seems like Washington Post has a tally of the president's lies, 4,229. It seems like the time it takes someone to type that number in, he's told 3 more. I mean, how do you, what is the point of and what is the value of what used to be a pretty heavy currency when I was working in politics, and I'm sure for you guys, the fact check?
Well, I'll tell you, so there was a key set of numbers that came out Sunday from CBS News, did a poll with YouGov, and what they found was that for strong Trump supporters, he is, for 91% of them, he is the most trusted source of quote-unquote accurate information more than their families. The media, mainstream media, was at 11%. So
this is among his supporters?
Among his strong supporters. Right. So it really tells us.
The enemy of the people, I'm surprised we got 11.
Yeah.
Peter Baker, let me ask you about the conduct at the press briefing today. New York Times publisher, I'm guessing that's your boss, was in with the president, not making any New York Times specific case, but simply talking about the effect around the world when the American president calls the media, generally speaking, the enemy of the people. I know it's uncomfortable to talk about yourselves or your roles because in this country we do have a lot of freedoms. We are, by and large, safe to go about doing our jobs. But what was the publisher of your paper trying to convey, and what are the concerns to be a White House reporter under this president?
Well, look, I don't know about cause and effect. That's obviously something that's going to be debated, but there is a real concern these days in our newsroom and other newsrooms about the safety of journalists. There has been for a long time, but it's hard not to watch what happened in Annapolis just a few months ago, maybe 2 months ago, with the gunman who showed up, not related to the president or the White House. But the environment is so toxic these days that security, of course, is a rising concern among journalists. And feeding into that concern, to hear a president sit there and talk about enemies of the people, to encourage crowds, not just to disapprove of the media or to criticize the media, but to heckle and jeer and to behave in the way you saw in that tape. That's what A.G. Sulzberger was talking about. And I think that, particularly he's concerned about overseas. Our foreign correspondents are in awfully hazardous places at times. And some of these really authoritarian regimes have taken what they see happening here and used it as an excuse for much more draconian, measures in their own countries that have put journalists, both foreign correspondents and their own domestic correspondents, at risk. So I think he was trying to get through to the president that there are consequences to words. And he was hoping for an audience that would be receptive.
It is Thursday, the 2nd of August of 2018, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Hey, our daily special is Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays, which is apropos since, it's a New Orleans dish. Well, my variation on a New Orleans dish. And Network Nation 18 is in New Orleans as we speak. Oh, my. Hey, Roaring Girl, Kelly Lincoln is there. And that's grand, isn't it? Yes, it is. She'll be manning Radio Row and roaming the hallways and other parts of the facility, as well as New Orleans itself. Indeed. Well, what a day. Oh, did you hear the latest one about Trump? And everybody will say, what? What did he do now? What did he say now? Okay, well, that was just a joke, because there's so much that goes on with that guy. You can't ever say that's the latest. But we do know that democracy is being held together maybe by a tiny gossamer thread. Or threads, gossamer threads. It could be that the tensile strength of those gossamer threads are, as strong or stronger than steel. Could be. But it's only just being held by a few gossamer threads. Seems that white people are about ready to give up on democracy. Well, I've been saying that since I was a kid. Didn't seem to me like they really liked democracy. It's the same. Well, let's put it this way. They are okay with welfare as long as it's going to them. Anybody else, it's stealing. Okay? And I'm not saying stealing in general. It's literally stealing from them. They get welfare, it's fine. But if you get welfare also, it's stealing their welfare. Same thing with the country. They think they are America, and anybody else who says that they're Americans means that those people are stealing the country from them. They have a hard time sharing, don't they? They can take all day, all night, every day, all night, for years, all their lives, generational. And it's okay. But anybody else says, maybe I might get a can of Campbell's tomato soup at the food pantry. Oh, no, you're stealing from me. Mm-hmm. That's how it goes. Not only are they attempting to just bail on democracy, they're okay with an autocrat, like Putin, running the show. Oh, you think Trump is running the show? We will become a vassal state to a country whose GDP is around Italy's. But with the help of the United States, they are now, a pretty good world power. I know they've got the nukes. But they, it's like having a big roundhouse. A roundhouse punch, okay? Yeah, if you connect, it could knock you out. But they're not the greatest punch, really. You show a lot. I don't know where I'm going with that. There's just so much more going on. The fires continue. Extreme conditions. In some instances, these firefighters are not only fighting the fire, but they're fighting like 120-degree heat. And that's not from the fire. That's from, the fires of the sun. Or, to be more exact, the fires of the sun heating up the layer underneath our atmosphere. That part from the atmosphere down gets caught by greenhouse gases and all that. Next thing you know, it's everything that was said that was going to happen. I think back in the 70s when we had the first Earth Day. I remember that day. I wore knee-high Indian moccasin boots. I was a hippie. Had hair. I had a headband. And, we had a big march in our little town in North Orange County. I don't know if it got into the LA Times, but the LA Times did report on Earth Days around the country. But yeah, we made the big Orange County paper. The Register, yeah. And things did get changed a bit. And why did Earth Day come about? Well, because there was this oil spill in Santa Barbara where, I got to tell you, some rich white people don't really like their beaches fouled. And something had to be done. And it was. Okay, so white people want to bail on democracy. Because apparently democracy looks like, America. They can't stand that. They want to go to white utopia. And, it can be very white in Siberia, though I don't know. Even the Arctic Circle is on fire. Sounds like it's terraforming, if you ask me. What's on the rest of the menu today? Because I'm just going on and on. We can't do that. We actually have a curated show for you today. Unbelievable as it may sound. Indeed. Well, that was MSNBC and others on the MSNBC panel there. Nicole Wallace, yes. Basically, expressing how vile Sarah Huckabee Sanders can be in her press conference. I had to put that on there. That's called a qualifier. And, just shrug off the hours of hate rallies that he puts on. It's their free speech. But don't you dare tell Sarah Huckabee Sanders that, we're going to comp your avocado plate. And you can just, I don't know, we don't feel comfortable with you here. Thank you. Goodbye. That is an affront to apparently put somebody out of business. Well, on the rest of the menu in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. Newly released documents reveal the Memphis police have been illegally spying on Black Lives Matter activists. Well, of course they would. They're the Memphis police, and who they're spying on are black. They have a long history of it, if you ask me. Trump's voter suppression guru, Kris Kobach, made big bucks by ripping off small towns. Grifters got a grift. And for almost 18 years, a Tokyo medical school altered admission test scores to keep women out. They were just too successful. I can't have that. And after the break, we then move to the chef's table, where Congress passed a bill forcing tech companies to disclose foreign software probes. You know, when a foreign entity probes their software. Yeah, Congress says you got to tell us when that happens, okay? And who says collusion is a crime? Why, the Department of Justice does, of course. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Go to the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. You'll notice the chat room link on the rightish of the page. And I will say that Kelly Lincoln monitors that most of the time. I don't know how much she'll be monitoring while she's at Netroots Nation, because she'll be pretty busy. But she'll be checking in. But there will be others in the chat room who, if you have never visited, will make you feel quite welcome. So do. All right. And while Kelly Lincoln is in New Orleans, we're going to continue making our small entreaty. If you could possibly throw some money her way so that she can buy lunch, dinner, and maybe breakfast somewhere, that would be grand, because budgets are tight for us, and I know they're tight for you too. But thank you for your generosity. We'll have our regular Netroots Radio contribute and donate buttons available. I think they're available now, but we'll have them updated, and so that, well, the funds go into our little bank account so that we can pay our bills. And we are unable to do this without you, and thank you for your generosity on that. You can follow Netroots Radio on Twitter at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that platform, and he does it very well. Thank you, Tom. And, he projects pretty much, our consensus thinking about the ways of the world and electing more and better Democrats. Isn't that the prime directive? Yes, it is. And you can also check us out over there on Facebook. Zuckerberg does what he wants. Kelly Lincoln takes care of that when I'm not doing it, and I'm supposed to. So I check in a little bit and try to keep things going, or whatever. You can follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. The show notes and links diary is posted about 10 minutes before showtime on Daily Codes. I'm there as Justice Putnam. The show is on Twitter at Cookbook West, and do follow the show there. I post the show notes there, or at least links, and also links to the podcast go on all social media. We're over on Facebook, just so you know, as West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. How easy is that? And I might as well tell you as well, podcasts can be had by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iTunes, YouTube. I think Apple Podcasts is that. I got some information or something that I was supposed to do with Apple Podcasts. I think I did. I'll have to check into that. Maybe I'll have the crew follow up. So yeah, but links will be posted on the diary and also all over social media. So check that out. And where they ask you to review, if you would, that would be good too, because I could have named the place Apple of Your Eye Cafe, and then I would have had the A in Apple push me way up in the search. Who does W? Yeah, well, Resistance Radio, that's who. All right, we better get on with the first offering that we have here at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grist Thursdays. Sam Fullwood III of Think Progress brings us this, And it looks like it's not just the NYPD that spies on people. You know, they have their own intelligence and counterintelligence thing going on. I guess because when you need to protect and serve the community, that's usually a community of one color. And it isn't anything but white. Black Lives Matter activists in Memphis, Tennessee learned last week that they'd made some new friends on Facebook. Local law enforcement. The discovery occurred in a very roundabout way in response to a lawsuit brought by the ACLU in Tennessee, which alleges that the Memphis Police Department had violated a 1978 consent decree promising not to spy on local political activists, because in a democracy you don't do that. Well, within that document dump of more than 300 pages of court filings and depositions was an interesting disclosure, an admission that the cops used a fake Facebook profile deployed in 2016 and 2017 to monitor surreptitiously on Black Lives Matter activists. The materials released by city officials painted a detailed and reluctant portrait of how the Memphis police, under the direction of its Office of Homeland Security, a special team created after the September 11, 2001 attacks. You know, in disaster capitalism, they do that. Okay? You know, we all talked about this way back in the day. Isn't that weird? 2001 is now way back in the day. The recent surveillance program started in reaction to large protests against police shootings across the country, and in particular to Black Lives Matter-led demonstrations following the 2015 Memphis police shooting of 19-year-old Darius Stewart. Among the pages of court filings and depositions in the ACLU case, police officials acknowledged creating an internal PowerPoint slideshow titled Blue Suede Shoes that cataloged the names and faces of BLM activists who'd participated or were arrested in connection with protests following Stewart's death. We have the right to shoot and kill who we want. After all, we work in the most dangerous industry in all of history. Which is not true. Roofers and loggers die at a much higher clip. I know you got to think like a crook to catch a crook, but after a while, sometimes you can become a crook. On the other hand, have you ever seen a crook who tried to act like an honest person and then become an honest person by, osmosis? I don't know. Maybe they would. This week's disclosure of the department's social media skullduggery, first reported by George Joseph of the Appeal, an online publication that specializes in legal and criminal justice system, comes as a shocking reminder of past misdeeds in Memphis, where city officials agreed 40 years ago to stop the clandestine tracking of civil rights activists. Today, however, city leaders see no contradiction between its history of illegal spying and its contemporary use of social media to collect information on individuals or groups the police deem a threat to public safety. To be sure, the ACLU of Tennessee has a long and acrimonious history with the Memphis police over its spying activities, going back to its 1976 investigation of the city's domestic intelligence unit, which illegally destroyed documents it had collected on civil rights groups. Why would they destroy documents unless they thought they had done something wrong? You would think, right? No, their cops are always doing something right. Officials at the ACLU in Memphis declined to comment directly on the case, citing its involvement in pending litigation. In an email statement provided to Think Progress, Lindsay Key, communications director for the ACLU in Tennessee, offered up a competing fact sheet laying out its current complaints against the Memphis police. Oliver Willis of Share Blue Media brings us this next offering here at the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Well, it looks like Kris Kobach, he's the guy who's led Trump's voter suppression efforts, bilked multiple small towns out of money while pursuing legally unsound immigration ordinances that cost those small towns millions. I don't know. I live in a small town, and we can't afford to lose millions. Just saying. All right. Well, he, of course, is the current Secretary of the state of Kansas, and he's also running for governor. And he led a scheme that bilked small towns out of thousands of dollars, all of which went to Kobach's personal bank account. Well. Nationwide, Kobach is most prominently known as the ringleader of the Trump administration's attempt to disenfranchise Democratic voters under the false pretense of voter fraud. A joint investigation by ProPublica and the Kansas City Star uncovered Kobach's scheme, which sounds like a real-life version of the Music Man if Harold Hill were an unscrupulous political consultant. You mean he wasn't? Kobach repeatedly visited small towns and convinced local officials that they should implement anti-immigrant ordinances. There's something really bad happening here in Centertown. He would then offer to consult with the officials to put these ordinances together, which, of course, meant paying Kobach a consultation fee. Well, wait a second. Every self-help group that I ever investigated or, well, when I say investigated, stupidly pursued and then really rather quickly got out of, is the same thing. Everybody's a consultant. Here. Kobach would assure the officials that the ordinances were on legal ground, but the towns often ended up forced to defend the sham laws in costly legal cases, some of which cost millions of dollars. Having pocketed his fees, Kobach would then move on to another town and do it all over again. Towns that took up Kobach's business were left with massive legal bills. Farmers Branch, Texas owed $7 million. Wow. Hazleton, Pennsylvania had to pay out $1.5 million and filed for a state bailout. Fremont, Nebraska had to raise, wait for it, property taxes to pay off Kobach. None of the towns still enforce the laws Kobach helped to create. All right, finishing up here in the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays, of course, is an article by anonymous worker bees from the Agence France Presse. A Tokyo medical school for years altered the admission test results of female applicants to keep the number of women in the student body low. The Yumamori Shimbun Daily said the manipulation came to light while prosecutors were investigating a separate scandal in which the Tokyo Medical University is accused of illicitly admitting the son of an education ministry bureaucrat. Following the report this morning, we asked a law firm to launch an internal investigation into the reported issue. A spokesman for the university told AFP, adding that it hopes to announce the result of the probe later this month. The law firm that will investigate the report already has an advisory contract with the university, but its usual consulting lawyer will not be part of the investigating team. The paper, citing unnamed sources, said the university began lowering the admission test scores of female applicants to its medical school in 2011 after the 2010 results showed an increasing number of women were winning places. In 2010, around 40% of successful applicants were women, double the previous year. After the university began to keep the percentage of women admitted each year to around 30% of the incoming class. So they did that afterwards. Women often quit after graduating and become a doctor when they get married and have a child. One source said in justifying the blanket alterations of admissions scores, they're just going to get married and stop being doctors. What about male guys? Do they stop being doctors when they get married? Well, I guess it's an old boys club, and these fellows are going to make sure it is. Even though Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has made womenomics, or boosting women's participation in the workplace and promoting women to senior positions a priority, the pace of the progress has been slow. Well, that's putting it mildly, isn't it? When you're, putting your finger on the scale. Interesting. All right, let's get to our break. We will come back and go through weather from around the world and finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata. Every day, 5 million commuters ride the Hong Kong metro. Human commuters, that is. Because there are countless more microbes riding the trains, too.
Yes, it seems that they are also riding the metro to move around without paying a ticket.
Yanni Panayotto is a systems biologist at the University of Hong Kong and the Hans Knoll Institute in Germany. He and his team tracked the ebb and flow of microbes in the Hong Kong metro by swabbing 6 volunteer commuters' palms as they commuted both day and night through the city's 8 urban lines. DNA sequencing revealed a lot of harmless skin and soil microbes, but also other germs that harbored antibiotic resistance genes. And while some trains had unique microbial fingerprints in the morning, like an above-ground line running near a polluted river that had more aquatic and sewage-related species, by the evening commute, the microbial footprint of all lines was nearly the same. In other words, microbes wind up commuting too. The studies in the journal Cell reports. The authors also hypothesized that cross-contamination can occur between regions with different antibiotics use or guidelines. For example, tetracycline is common on mainland China's pig farms, and it was the line crossing into Hong Kong from mainland China that shuttled the most tetracycline resistance genes into the city each morning, where they then disperse throughout the entire system. Panayotto says people shouldn't be worried too much about it, though. It's not a serious health risk.
Having said that, it's a good idea to wash your hands after you're back at home.
Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Pools, water parks, and other recreational water venues are popular places to relax and stay cool, but they can be sources of serious illness. Since 2000, nearly 500 outbreaks have been reported at recreational water venues in the U.S., resulting in over 27,000 illnesses and 8 deaths. Most were caused by parasites, bacteria, viruses, or certain chemicals in the water. Parents with young children who have diarrhea should not allow their children to swim or play in the water. In addition, bathers should check the inspection scores of pools and water parks and can conduct mini inspections using test strips before getting in the water. A few simple precautions can allow you to share the fun, not the germs. Thank you for joining us on A Minute of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Welcome to 60 Second Civics, the daily podcast of the Center for Civic Education. I'm Mark Gage. The Declaration of Independence claims that life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness are inalienable rights. Every day we make numerous choices in deciding what course of action will add to our well-being, what will make us happy. Making these choices is the pursuit of happiness. The results of our choices are not all equal. We soon discover that choosing some pleasures, especially following momentary impulses, leads not to happiness, but to pain. But if we use our faculty of foresight, recalling past experience, we learn to postpone immediate gratification and see what choices are really in our interest. Thus, learning self-control based on experience is essential to happiness. That's all for today's podcast. The show's theme song is Complacent by Cheryl B. Engelhardt. You can find Cheryl online at cbemusic.com. 60 Second Civics, where civic education only takes a minute.
You can help stop the Trump agenda in its tracks. Make sure you're registered to vote. Go to rockthevote.org. And on November 6th, vote for Democrats up and down the ticket. This message, a public service from all the fine people of netrootsradio.com.
How about a $580 copay for your next doctor's visit?
I'm Baratunde Thurston from The Onion, and also, mother. You're listening to the Civil Liberties Minute with ACLU attorney Bill Newman.
As the executive director of the Prison Policy Initiative, Peter Wagner, recently put it, a $3 copay for a doctor's visit really doesn't sound unreasonable until you learn that the person paying is earning 14 cents an hour, which is what happens in the Massachusetts prison system. It's the equivalent of a minimum wage worker being charged $235 as a copay for an office visit. In Oklahoma, prisoners at the bottom of the wage scale earn 5 cents an hour, and so the required $4 copay for a medical visit is roughly equivalent to a $580 copay outside the razor wire. These copay requirements often leave persons in prison with two bad choices: either do without the medical care or rely on family members who don't have the money to send it to them anyway for their needed treatment. Squeezing a few dollars from incarcerated people and from the poorest families puts the health of other inmates, the prison staff, and persons outside at risk. It's a terrible system, cruel and self-defeating, but most states do impose it on the most vulnerable among us.
The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1937. That was the day 1,800 auto workers sat down at the Ford Motor Plant in Richmond, California. It was the largest Ford plant on the West Coast. The UAW organizing drive at Ford had just begun a few weeks earlier with a sit-down strike in Kansas City. Company manager Clarence Bullwinkle reported he had returned from lunch only to find the plant occupied and all the power shut off. Workers began their occupation after 12 workers with seniority rights had been transferred from the assembly plant to the loading department and then discharged. Strikers voted to allow company officials and office workers to leave the plant but not return. Bullwinkle was told to get out and stay out until you meet our demands. He refused to budge and holed up in his office. Demands included recognition of the union, seniority rights, and regular pay instead of discharge for workers who are out sick or injured on duty. As the night shift arrived and then left, they passed their lunch buckets in solidarity to the striking workers. Within 12 hours, the strike was reportedly called off after Ford officials agreed to meet with strikers. Seeing this as tantamount to winning union recognition, workers paraded through the streets in the early hours of Saturday morning. But they hit the picket lines later that day when Ford officials failed to appear. By Monday, they were right back on the job. Fearing another day's loss of production, Ford officials met with union leaders. While workers did not win formal recognition, they did win seniority rights and recognition of the Shop Stewards Committee in a first step toward union recognition, which would come 4 years later. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labor.
I'm C. Marie Ainsborough. A project to help migrant garment workers in Jordan is proving so successful that it may be duplicated in other countries. The Al Hassan Workers Center in Jordan is a project of the Jordanian government and the International Labor Organization. The ILO is the United Nations specialized agency focused on matters of work in the world. It's managed in a tripartite fashion with representatives of governments, employers, and labor unions. The Al Hassan Industrial Zone is the largest of Jordan's 14 zones. Almost 20,000 migrant workers, mainly from South Asia, are employed in the zone's garment factories. The isolated location of the zone in Jordan posed many educational, health, and recreational problems. And so the ILO, with its Better Work program, started the center in 2013. Emily Hilton is a project manager for the Workers' Center.
The Workers' Center, initiated by Better Work Jordan and the Al Hassan Industrial Zone, is the first of its kind in Jordan. It's a place where workers can come and play games, meet each other, have a cup of coffee, and it's a space that's completely independent from their workplaces and their dormitories, which are usually controlled by their employers. We want the Workers' Center to be a place where workers can come and support each other and can get the supports that they need to face some of these issues, supports that they wouldn't find anywhere else in the industrial zone.
Here's one of the workers who uses the Workers' Center services.
This is a worker center. We can, any worker, how the problem, anything, so you can explain there. Anytime, any place, you can come to there and complain.
Sandra Snow is a former garment worker who is now a project coordinator at the center.
The workers from different nationalities are working in Jordan and they are away from their families. Sometimes they face some violation in their workplace, like working very long hours, or getting less salary, and sexual harassment. And some other difficulties about food, water, and health. And also some workers are stressed about being in debt too. At the Worker Center, the worker can use the computer lab to Skype their family in their home countries. The workers can use the gym to exercise or to take dance classes. The workers can take their English classes and computer classes to build their skill. So when they go home, they can have some other job opportunities and they can be promoted in their workplaces too. The worker can also get the legal help, union representation, and health services when those are needed.
Philip Fishman is the manager of the ILO's Better Work program in Jordan.
The idea of the Workers' Center emerged out of what was clearly a very strong need that workers were expressing. And from the point of view of the ILO and Better Work, it also gives us an opportunity to talk to workers without their employers being there. So it's given us an ability to learn much more about what their daily lives are like and what it's like to come to Jordan as a migrant worker and to work in the garment sector. There are 3 major zones in Jordan where most garment factories are located, and our hope is that in the next few years that all 3 of these zones will have worker centers.
The Al Hassan Workers' Center has been financially supported by the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation. I'm C. Marie Ainsborough. Thank you for listening.
From UN headquarters in New York, I'm Luke Vargas with your World in 2 minutes. A new survey finds just 13% of the world's oceans qualify as wilderness, untouched by human activity like shipping, fishing, oil extraction, pollution runoff, or climate change-fueled warming.
There's a lot of things that happen in the oceans. We don't often see them because it's so vast and kind of out of sight, out of mind.
Benjamin Halpern directs the National Center for Ecological Analysis and Synthesis at the University of California.
But we are having a lot of impact on the oceans, and our efforts are to map that, get a sense of where it is.
Using Halpern's data on the world's oceans, Kendall Jones of Australia's University of Queensland mapped out where ocean wilderness still remains.
Almost all of that is found at high latitudes in the Arctic or the Antarctic and in remote areas of the Pacific.
Jones knew ocean wilderness was under threat, but his results still shocked him.
After exploring the data and digging in and seeing just how widespread everything is, it made me think that probably we wouldn't find any wilderness or not much in coastal regions. But the fact that we found so little even in the high seas in these places that are far away from any land was really surprising to me.
Since most ocean wilderness is in remote international waters, a global UN treaty will be needed to ensure conservation. But in the meantime, Halpern says conservationists may need to triage the damage.
I actually come away with from our study with a bit of hope. 13% of the ocean, it's not a lot, but that's still a lot of space that we think is in relatively good shape. And if we put a lot of effort into managing and protecting it to keep it in pretty good shape, that's in my mind anyway, a really good strategy for helping keep the oceans healthy and much more effective and efficient than trying to go to places that are already at the risk of losing species and trying to sink a lot of money and time into trying to recover them.
Luke Vargas, the United Nations.
Well, thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays, an homage to New Orleans, by the way. And weather from around the world always begins along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently about 57, 58 degrees. And we're going to be a little cooler today. Looks like we're going to be in the low to mid 90s. And we were up in the upper 90s, low 100s yesterday. And it seems like a small respite. We will take it. It's going to be fair, which means, a little bit of clouds up in the sky, possibly. Winds right now are out of the south-southwest, about 1 mile per hour. Will, as usual, pick up to 5 to 10 miles per hour in a few hours. Coming out of the northwest, they will shift this evening out of the northwest, continuing their clip at 5 to 10. And tomorrow, though, they will then shift out of the northwest or back to the northwest, continuing at 5 to 10 miles per hour, which is the usual. Dry conditions will continue, though humidity is at 69% currently. Grass pollen is considered moderate. Air quality index is considered moderate at 93 parts per million. It was in the 60s just about an hour and a half ago. So there you go for that. The UV daytime index remains very high, though at 8. It has been at 9, but this is just indicative of how much smoke remains in the air. Once again, high pressure dominates, though holding steady right now at 29.94 inches. Visibility is at 7 miles because of smoke. And once again, currently the humidity is at 69%. It's been rather muggy, so I don't know where it's going to go. Probably stay somewhere around there. Okay. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted. These purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property. And these people positively live around the world. London is 84 degrees and sunny. Paris is 90 degrees and sunny with a heat advisory, and so stay cool there, folks. Rome is 94 and fair, and Paris is an active advisory, and Rome is just an advisory for heat and may impact critical infrastructure. Kiev is 83 degrees and fair. Kabul is 82 and fair. I would keep the wedding parties inside, and even that might not help. Okay? It could be raining drones. Okay, Hong Kong is 80 degrees and partly cloudy. Tokyo, 85 and partly cloudy. Sydney, Australia, is 54 and clear. San Francisco, California is 51 degrees and mostly cloudy with an air advisory because of all the smoke blowing their way from all the forest fires that are on fire. And New York is 82 degrees Fahrenheit and currently mostly cloudy, but you're going to be fair as the Big Apple can be. And that is Weather from Around the World, brought to you by People's Personal Weather Stations, except for the fact that New Orleans, I forgot about New Orleans. Let me tell you New Orleans real quick. Oh my gosh, right now New Orleans is 84 degrees Fahrenheit. Oh, it looks like there's some weather cells coming through. You're going to have nearly the same temperature. Today you've got 40% chance of rain with 0.04 inches. Evening thunderstorms, and the high will be around 88 today. Winds are out of the east-northeast at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Tonight, precipitation possibility decreases to 20%. Partly cloudy, overnight low of 75 degrees, with the winds out of the east-northeast at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And that is Weather from Around the World, and is brought to you by People's Personal Weather Stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Joel Scheckman from Reuters brings us this first offering here at the chef's table. At West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays, the Congress is sending Donald Trump legislation that would force technology companies to disclose if they allowed countries like China and Russia to examine the inner workings of software sold to the U.S. military. The legislation, part of the Pentagon spending bill, was drafted after a Reuters investigation last year found software makers allowed a Russian defense agency to hunt for vulnerabilities in software used by some agencies of the U.S. government, including the Pentagon and intelligence services. The final version of the bill was approved by the Senate in an 87-10 vote on Wednesday after passing the House last week. Who were the 10 people who voted against it? I wonder. Freedom Caucus? The spending bill is expected to be signed into law by Trump. Expected is always never a given. Security experts said allowing Russian authorities to probe the internal workings of software known as source code could help Moscow discover vulnerabilities they could exploit to more easily attack U.S. government systems. Well, I thought that's what Trump wanted the lad to come here and do. The new rules were drafted by Democratic Senator Jeanne Shaheen of New Hampshire. This disclosure mandate is the first of its kind and is necessary to close a critical security gap in our federal acquisition process, Shaheen said in a statement. The Department of Defense and other federal agencies must be aware of foreign source code exposure and other risky business practices that can make our national security systems vulnerable to adversaries. Companies would be required to address any security risk posed by the foreign source code reviews to the satisfaction of the Pentagon or lose the contract. The legislation also creates a database searchable by other government agencies which software was examined by foreign states that the Pentagon considers a cyber security risk. Tommy Ross, a senior director for policy at the industry group, the Software Alliance, said software companies had concerns that such legislation could force companies to choose between selling to the U.S. and foreign markets. Oh, we're seeing a worrying trend globally where companies are looking at cyber threats and deciding the best way to mitigate risk is to hunker down and close down to the outside world. All right. In many cases, Reuters found that the software companies had not informed U.S. agencies that Russian authorities had been allowed to conduct the source code reviews. In most cases, the U.S. military does not require comparable source code reviews before it buys software, procurement experts told Reuters.
Je te donne, c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Ryan Goodman of Just Security brings us this last offering here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Donald Trump and his lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, are now trying to claim that collusion is not a crime. Several months ago, I wrote, this being Goodman, a New York Times op-ed about the misuse of the term collusion, and earlier this summer, I testified before Congress and very purposefully never used the word collusion in my written testimony, which outlined possible crimes for working with Russia to interfere in the 2016 election. Instead, I stuck to the terms one finds in the U.S. Federal Code, such as conspiracy and federal campaign finance law violations. That said, the acts we would ordinarily associate with collusion could easily amount to a crime. We could have detailed a discussion of which acts and which crimes exactly, but here, I want to make just one point. Any discussion in this space should include an understanding that the U.S. Justice Department has set out explicitly that acts of collusion can amount to a federal crime and has done so specifically with the respect to the jurisdiction of Special Counsel Robert Mueller. Yeah, see that. An August 2nd, 2017 Justice Department memorandum signed by Acting Attorney General Rod Rosenstein entitled The Scope of Investigation and Definition of Authority details the individuals and activities that fall within the order appointing the special counsel. The memorandum states, the following allegations are within the scope of the investigation at the time of your appointment are within the scope of the order. And then there's allegations that Paul Manafort committed a crime or crimes by colluding with Russian government officials with respect to the Russian government's efforts to interfere with the 2016 election for the President of the United States in violation of United States law. Colluded with Russian government officials with respect to Russian government efforts, and this is about Manafort, to interfere with the 2016 election for President of the United States in violation of United States law. The end. All right, and that does bring us to the end of our broadcast period for the day. But, of course, Netroots Radio broadcasts on throughout the rest of the day. We'll visit with you tomorrow for Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. Do stay tuned to Netroots Radio for breaking news as it breaks throughout the day and the night, and we will visit with you tomorrow in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goer. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs sous la pluie d'un novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin l'âge tendre, nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver.